This is All India Radio. Whispers of the Wind. All India Radio, in collaboration with Vigyan-Prasar, presents science serial Whispers of the Wind, based on understanding and managing climate change and global warming. Let's listen to episode number 11, an interactive program based on listeners' letters.
Hello and a warm welcome. We welcome all our listeners to the special edition of the serial Whispers of the Wind. And it's a pleasure welcoming Dr. Nakul Parashar, Director Vigyan-Prasar, Dr. B. K. Tyagi, Senior Scientist and Coordinator of this serial Whispers of the Wind, to the studios. And of course, we are also joined today by Dr. Suchismita Mukhopadhyay of WWF India. And in the next 25-26 minutes or so, we'll try to take a look at the trajectory of this particular serial, the way it's moving forward. I can see Dr. Tyagi is carrying a bunch of letters and emails also. Plus, there are quite a few other things that come under the larger ambit, the larger backdrop of the serial Whispers of the Wind. And a very important part of that is the air that we breathe around us. I'd like to begin with Dr. Tyagi. This is a special edition, and before we move on to other things, I'd like you to do a brief recap of what all has happened since we last met 2 months ago. Of course, the weather has taken a sharp turn, and
yes,
all of us are feeling the sweltering heat.
Yes, that time we all were in, woolens. And now you can see even whatever we are wearing, we don't feel like to put it on. Okay, since then, I think more than 8 episodes our listener might have listened. And during the first episode, we discussed about the total content of the program. And the first segment, which is just over, the last episode was on from that segment. And in that, we were trying to understand the science of climate change and global warming, because generally every factor nowadays we are attributing to climate change and global warming. It is because of this. In this segment, including the curtain raiser, we try to understand the science of climate change, which includes the difference between climate and weather and the factor responsible for Earth's climate, because it's not only the human intervention which has because of which the temperature is rising. There are many natural factors as well. So without understanding that, even the radiation of the sun which is coming, which it also has a periodicity, cyclic, the change, and the revolution and the rotation of Earth in its orbit. In the past also we have seen there was a phases of global warming and global dimming. So we also try to understand those concepts also, and how the climate is in a natural way have changed over the past across the globe. So this was also gave us a clue that it's a natural process. It's not like it's only, no doubt that time there are factors which have enhanced, which has expedite that climate change, but climate change is a natural process. So in that first segment we try to understood that the whole concept that this is a natural process, and if we are facing those extreme weather condition, all are not attributable to that so-called to the anthropogenic factor which is responsible presently for the climate change. So this was all about, in a nutshell, about this thing.
Dr. Parashar, quickly, after you took over the reins at Vigyan-Prasar, this sort of an arrangement, this sort of an interactive arrangement between Vigyan-Prasar, All India Radio and the listeners, how novel did you think that this step was? I mean, this was the first time you were handling such a...
No, thank you so much. This kind of an arrangement, talking about climate change with All India Radio, is indeed a novel one. It's indeed a new one that we all know. We also have in the past been trying to work in a similar fashion through different media that are available, whether it is print, whether it is electronic, whether it is digital, whether it is social. So all 4 kinds of media that are available, we've ventured into them, and our experience so far has been pretty satisfactory. The kind of response, the kind of letters that we have received from our listeners, from people who keep on watching what we've produced, and people who've been reading the content that we have created and gotten to them. Interestingly, in the print side, we have a magazine which is called Dream 2047, and we've been talking about it. Our continuous endeavor in this regard has been to write as many as articles we can from different people, different sources. People have different perception about what all these climate changes. You just heard Dr. Tyagi talking about various factors, and not only, as we all understand, is it all man-made, but it's a natural process as well. And to make people understand that it's not that we are all responsible for it, we are not the culprits for it, it's also the natural way it's happening. So, as I was saying, print media, we had letters, we had responses, we had articles, and in my editorial that I keep contributing on a regular basis, all my 4 or 5 editorials that I have written so far do mention climate change at one place or the other. Similarly, at our science channel that we have, the TV channel that we produce, where we produce a lot of bunch of movies, documentaries, short films, and we do have an OTT, IndiaScience.in, which is a 24/7 internet-based television channel, does talk about a bunch of these. And if you need to know about them, we have a YouTube channel called DD Science Vigyan-Prasar, and you could probably go and look at the repository that we have created over a period of time. So, indeed, it's a journey that keeps us busy around the clock, and especially with the rising temperatures, right, feeling it, right, as they normally keep saying, Bharati Tapish. So we all feel that heat. Now, if we are in a comfort zone, and the moment we get out of it, we start creating a lot of brouhaha around it. But it's important that we need to remember this and work on a consistent manner, not as a one-off. It cannot be in isolation. It has to be a way of life, not a moment of triumph.
Dr. Suchasmita, Dr. Parashar and Dr. Tyagi have been talking about, reaching out to the masses on issues related to climate change and other allied things. Have you had any experience of any sort in this sort of an endeavor within your organization where you tried to reach out to people? And how was the experience, if yes?
What we've realized is that it's very important to reach out to multiple stakeholders. We can't just be talking to policymakers, or we can't just be talking within the circles of the think tanks about climate change and then, publishing something which is too scientific or too difficult to understand. This has to go out to different stakeholders. I'll take an example of some of the work that we do with the cities. So it's important for the local governments to also realize that they are also part of the problem and they are also part of the solution. So as the cities are growing, right now over 50% of the population is living in the cities. In India, we're at 31% of urbanization, and this is likely to go up to 40% by 2030 and much beyond by 2050. And as the cities continue to urbanize, as the population goes on increasing, there are issues of more energy consumption, there are issues of pollution, unmanaged waste, unsustainable use of natural resources. Basically, the entire quality of life and the sustainability of a city keeps going down. And therefore, it's important for the cities to also understand that it's not what they're doing within the city limits, but it's also what they're doing contributes to the national as well as the global climate change discourse. Like, for example, if I talk about, there are 2 aspects to the climate change discussion. It is mitigation and adaptation. So adaptation is how do you sort of prepare yourselves to counter the impacts, and mitigation is what you really do to be part of the solution. And when I say impacts, is important for the cities to be working on transportation, better transportation, sustainable mobility, that is, you reduce the share of fossil fuels, reduce GHG emissions from private transport, move more towards non-motorized transportation, towards BRTs, towards better public transport, better waste management, enhance the share of renewable energy and energy efficiency within the city. And in doing all of this, the city can't be doing it alone. The citizens have a major role to play, because we ourselves have to bring about the behavior change, the lifestyle change.
You mentioned
Very well
stakeholders.
said.
I'll just come back to you. She mentioned stakeholders, and I was suddenly reminded what happened, I think, was it last Friday or the one before that? There's a campaign called Fridays for Future. And this young student, Greta Thunberg, she has been the source behind this. And it was a heartwarming eye-opener to see students out on the streets demanding nothing extraordinary except, clean places and clean air. So to say. So that was really interesting, as well as reading that those articles was a learning experience. You were saying something.
Yeah, I was saying my only worry sometimes is like if we look at the energy consumption pattern in India, because we have such a great diversity and the requirement is also different. But how we can provide a solution to each of them? Suppose small production house or medium production house. Forget about the bigger one. Changing their overall, pattern, it seems to be a bit difficult. So what could be the solution? My question is from you.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we've always talked about the jugaad in India.
Yeah.
But if you look at it more formally, I think India is bubbling with innovation.
Yeah.
And there are several of these startups, smaller companies, SMEs, that have a lot of these innovations that are looking at really addressing climate change. There are They're looking at very innovative technologies that can enhance the uptake of renewable energy and that can sort of bring in energy efficiency more into the picture. And some of these solutions would be, cooling solutions, solar air conditioning solutions. There are demand side management solutions. These are very innovative technologies that are applicable across bigger industries, across, they can work with the municipal corporations, they can work with residential areas. So some of these technologies really need to be promoted more. They need a lot of hand holding because these are very small companies that have an idea, but they don't have the finance, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the capacities to really build on it, and most importantly, they don't have the right business models, they don't have the right business development plans. So I think sort of promoting these innovations can really go a long way in providing the right kind of solutions to address climate change.
Allow me to pick up a point from that was very interesting. You mentioned cooling solutions. Now, one always used to wonder whether this machine called the air cooler vis-a-vis the air conditioner, does it exist only in India? I did a search on the internet and I was taken aback to see that even in the US, the concept of air coolers is very much there. And this particular debate of coolers versus air conditioners exists there also. Dr. Parashar, I would like to, utilize your experience to learn more about this debate.
It's a very interesting fact that developed countries like US have a great deal of air coolers, and for us it's important when we talk about the climate change, whether it is the Paris Declaration, whether it is something that we discussed in Poland. Everywhere you come down to change and adapting our lifestyles, and lifestyles play a very important role. If you recall, about a decade ago or more than a bit ago, we had desert coolers, much in number, and they were much more sufficing our needs, especially when it used to be so-called dry heat. Areas like Nagpur, others where we have only dry heat, these are the only solutions. Jodhpur, where these solutions work much better. And I think that's a time like we have something called back to our lifestyle. That's very important. Unless we go and adapt them, and that's what has been deliberated upon, and that's what the entire community that's working in this area has unanimously agreed upon. Unless we change our lifestyles, go back to where we had come from and adapt them and see, we talk about reducing the carbon footprint, we talk about the greenhouse effects, we talk of all these things that have been there, and not only you and me, but everybody on the street now understands this. So I think it's very important. The fundamental problem has been climate change and all that stuff, but there is the solution and resolution that we've all arrived at is about lifestyle. Unless we get to that lifestyle, we're not going to go there. And this exactly reminds me of what Professor Suchishmita said, is about cities. When cities start talking to each other, the best practices that you were mentioning about, if you could help us understand much more about it, I think we'll have a reasonable solution to what we're all deliberating upon.
Right. So, it's very heartening to see that Indian cities are now part of the change also. When we look at the best practices, we usually see what's happening in some part of the world. Denmark is going towards cycling and some other cities doing something. But if you look within, we see that a lot of the Indian cities are now pioneering climate action. They may not be looking at it as climate action, but what they're doing definitely has a big impact on addressing climate change. And let me talk about some of the things that are happening in Indian cities and very well. I'd like to talk about, there was this program called the 100 Resilient Cities program, under which some of the cities actually went down to developing their resilience strategies. The city of Surat has now come up with their resilience strategies. It is being now, the other cities like Pune and the others are now following them. They are also coming up with these strategies, which is a very comprehensive document that talks about exactly what the city needs to do to safeguard itself, whether in terms of flood, whether in terms of heat, whether in terms of even down to road safety. So what is it that makes the city really, really resilient to the impacts of climate change and other urban resilience issues? And then there's the heat action plan in Ahmedabad, which talks about the extreme heat events. So when the city is hit by an extreme heat event, the hospitals know what to do, the civil society knows what to do, and the general citizen on the road knows what to do.
It's a multi-pronged.
There's a forecasting system, so the citizens are already informed much in advance that there is a likelihood of such an event. Then these things like better waste management practices in Indore, which has really championed the cause. They're doing excellent work on waste management, and it has gone down to the citizen level. So what I hear is that now the citizens themselves demand segregation. So when there are people coming in from Indore to a household in Delhi and they see that there is no waste segregation, they ask the question, isn't that mandatory here? Examples like these, and of course transportation. There are excellent BRT examples. The bus rapid transports are taking up very well. Metro, of course, is a bigger investment,
Yeah.
but for bigger cities, again, that is also a solution. And then I think a lot of cities are now moving towards non-motorized transportation. They're promoting cycling, making better walking tracks. So these are some of the examples that exist and which need to be discussed. And basically, cities need to be brought to one platform where they can talk to each other, get encouraged, and not feel that this is something that can happen, or maybe it might happen, but it's something that
Or it's
will
not
happen.
a sign of backwardness.
Exactly.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because this is
we are as much advanced
yes.
and we are thinking ahead.
Yes.
I'll request Dr. Tyagi to start touching the letters now, because it's a very important part of our program.
I think today I'll take the first letter, which is slightly pointing out towards one mistake. This is a letter.
Let's be candid about it.
Yeah, I think it's letter.